But what I do get to do, and I'm grateful to CBS for this, that I do get to do the show I feel like doing. And tonight I'm not comfortable making jokes about drunk celebrities and Hollywood nut jobs. If, by the way, you are a drunk celebrity and you're a Hollywood nut job, don't get me the wrong idea. I'll be back at you tomorrow. It's just tonight. If I stop making fun of the celebrities, the terrorists win. So I will. But listen, I know I do important work here, and I thank you, everybody. It's been 6 years since this happened, and people talk about closure, which I've always found a ridiculous concept. Closure. I mean, to me, grief is like a scar. You know, I've got a little scar in my hand here. It's about an inch long, a scar. When I was 18 years old, I was, and I got into a fight with a window, and the window won. I punched the window. It was looking at me the wrong way. And what happens? I got wounded. I got a scar, and it hurt like hell. And of course, where you get a scar, you stitch it up, it heals, but you've got a scar. And you should never forget how you got a scar, or you might get another one. So we forget our history at our own peril, I think. I'm not saying we should live in the past, but we're foolish not to look back. Today is a very important anniversary. And we've got to remember it. Speaking as a man that's been divorced twice, I know the dangers of forgetting anniversaries. You can lose up to half your stuff. Anyway, it's true. Look, what I'm saying is that everything changed on 9/11. The way we look at the flag, the way we look at the rest of the world, the way we look at each other. For example, the firefighters and the cops and the other rescue workers. I think before 9/11, some people, and I include myself, took these people for granted, didn't really think about them. But these first responders ran straight into those towers, past the people that were running out. They knew where they were going, they knew what they were running into, and they did it anyway. That's crazy to me. That kind of bravery, that's unbelievable to me. And New York City lost a lot, of course. America lost a lot that day. There were more than New York. And I have to be careful, and we have to be careful, I think. We don't want to lose more. We don't want to lose what this country stands for. We don't want to lose the freedom of the press. We don't want to lose our civil liberties. We don't want to lose our reasonably priced snacks. I don't know. I'm going to ace this citizenship test. I mean, what I'm saying is... Let me try and explain. Colin Powell said recently, he said, and I quote, he said, "What is the greatest threat facing us now? People will say terrorism. But are there any terrorists in the world who can change the American way of life or our political system? No. Can they knock down a building? Yes. Can they kill somebody? Yes. But can they change us? No. Only we can change ourselves." And I agree with him. I see what he's saying. Mel Gibson said something similar in Braveheart. He said, "They may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom." And who would have thought that Mel Gibson would be at his most lucid when his face was painted blue? But he... See, now, what happened there was, I made a drunk celebrity joke. Take that, Al-Qaeda! Take that! What's happening? What happens is, Osama bin Laden, of course, is still out there. 6 years later, forgive me, that rat bastard is still out there making his videotapes. And we need to find him, and we need to bring him to justice. And by justice, I mean we give him a fair trial, we find him guilty, and we hang him. And if we... This is just my opinion. If we don't have hanging anymore, I say bring it back for the day, and then we can get rid of it again. It's dangerous, this. It's tricky, and I can sense you're uneasy, and I'm a little uneasy myself. I don't want to be maudlin, I don't want to sound pompous, but I can't not mark this occasion. It's a tough day, and it's tough to look at it. It was a lot tougher then, it's tough now. And I feel that I don't have the words to adequately express what this day means. And when I find myself in a situation like that, what I do is I steal someone else's words. And what I do, when I steal from the best. Abraham Lincoln said in the Gettysburg Address, when he was remembering those lost in a national tragedy, he said, "The world will little note nor long remember what we say here." It's like he was looking into the future and seeing this show, but he went, wait. What he said was, "The world can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work." And there's clearly unfinished work. Like I said, that bastard is still out there putting his tapes together. Let me just conclude from the Gettysburg Address. He said, "We here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth." We'll be right back, everybody.
The Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson, sponsored by Mazda, always the soul of a sports car.
Welcome back. Welcome back, my naughty donkeys. Oh. My first guest tonight is a country music superstar. He's got a new album, Dwight Sings Buck, which is due out next month. Please welcome my buddy Dwight Yoakam, everybody.
I'm actually relieved. I'm relieved to see they got the correct size album, because I heard there was a large scale kind of version of that floating around.
Yeah, there's a big.
It's a billboard size thing that they hoped you wouldn't.
I can't put a billboard size
no,
thing
I know.
on.
I said.
Yeah.
I saw it earlier and I said that's kind of obnoxious, but I'm glad that you ended up with the correct.
Yeah, this is, and I'll put this in my iPod. Well, I don't know how you do that, but I'll do it.
Did you purchase it?
Yeah, I went out and bought
How you do it is you buy the record.
No, I can't afford that kind of money. You know, I mean, what's that? This is like $15 for one of these?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, all right. Yeah.
But worth every penny.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. I thank you for coming on today. You know, I never know how to handle September 11th show. Where were you?
You know, a lot of people have quit handling it, and that's it's kind of strange. When you called, they asked if I'd come on.
Yeah.
And we chose a song off of this album actually that Buck wrote, and it was sublimely poignant. You know, Buck was a very happy guy and always kind of, you know, a shrug and a smile, and as I was doing this record, I didn't realize the depth of emotions that I would feel and what his songs would bring to me emotionally. And that song, when you asked about today, although it doesn't deal with the thing specifically about this, it's more of a love lament, but it's about remembering.
And that's what this is about. How do you remember it?
Well, you know. As fate would have it, that morning we had a day off of touring on Monday, September 10th in 2001. I was in Richmond, Virginia on the 9th. 10th we were off, and we thought, well, we'll spend the day in D.C. So we were at a hotel in Pentagon City, and my mother called and called through to my room. It was early in the morning, and I sleep in, and I thought, well, you know, there's something wrong with the family, and she said, "Are you watching the news?" And I turned the news on, and of course the first couple of planes had hit the trade centers at that point. And my girlfriend then was at JFK waiting to go out, and so I called her, called my mom back, and as I was speaking to my mother, the window in my room shook from the concussion of the blast of the aircraft. Flight 77 had struck, and I said, I said, I knew I was a quarter mile. I was across the street from the Pentagon. So I said, I've got to go. I said, I think they blew up the Pentagon. And didn't know till I got to the window I could see a trail that it was evidently the plane.
Right.
So it was a strange, surreal, and bizarre experience for me. And I didn't find out till later that day, actually early the next morning, that a friend of mine who had directed 3 of my videos, Ain't That Lonely Yet, which was a big hit for me in 1993, 1,000 Miles from Nowhere, I co-directed with her, and Fast As You. Carolyn Mare-Bugh was on the first flight. I think it was a United flight out of Boston that went in to the Trade Center. Had lost her life in that, and her mother was with her, and they had left. You know, it's the mundane aspects of what was going on in that day before that moment that affected me, and still does. She left her 2 children, her 2 daughters, for their first semester at the Rhode Island School of Design, and I have never been able to, you know, get that out of my mind, that, you know, what had been a mother and daughter, and at that point grandmother, experience of transitioning in life was followed by that horrific moment that nobody could have anticipated or expected, and it changed all of us. The thing is that I think that what you're doing, Craig, and I said this to you, you know, off stage, and why it's important, and it's awkward now to, you know, to people think, let's get on with our lives. This whole firefighter this morning who was there in the building and lost a lot of friends saying, yeah, I've moved on with my life, and then he stopped, he said, but I can't really. And we owe it to those people who lost loved ones directly, I think, to honor their loss with, if nothing else, just bowing our heads and saying, we all remember, we were there, we were alive. In 50 years, there'll be several generations of people who weren't alive, you know, at that moment.
Yeah.
The great news is we survived. What you said earlier about our, and what Colin Powell said is correct.
Yeah, I just copy him.
You know, well, that's if you're going to steal.
Yeah, I know. It's like, thank you, General. Yeah.
But I think it's correct, and I think that's what we all should, you know, we hold and remember, is that we in fact survived, and we will survive it, and it's not about who's in power in this country.
See, that's what
who's in elected office at any given time. It's about, you know, all of us, and if nothing else, for that few days after that, when I came back to L.A., it was interesting. You know, flags went up everywhere, and it wasn't about being from a red state or a blue state or being a Democrat or a Republican. It had nothing to do with anything other than our shared pain and our shared sense of loss and the shared shock and horror and I think outrage at human beings doing this to innocent people. And that's what we're remembering. That's what you're allowing the country to remember and your audience to remember. And thank you for doing so. And I think you should be given your citizenship just on the basis of...
I don't think it works that way. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back with Dwight Yoakam, everybody.
You got me dreaming those dreams again, thinking those things again. I gotta take you back just one more time.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. I'm here. Dwight Yoakam is here, everybody. Now that was you singing with
Buck
Owens.
Yeah, that was with Buck. I
Dwight's...
hadn't seen that clip in years and years and years. I guess it's out in Austin City Limits. We did that, I think, in 1989 or
How did you get in touch with Buck Owens?
I drove to Bakersfield, walked down to his radio station, walked in on him in his radio station, and said, "Hi, Buck." I was a big fan, and I had dedicated a song on my second album, Hillbilly Deluxe. I had written a song called "Little Ways," and it was an homage to Buck and the sound of his music. Off air, where I was talking to you about from about 1962 to 1967 or 68. There was nobody that was better than Buck Owens, I don't think, in country music, and the Bakersfield sound, which is what California country music was called, because Buck Owens, Merle Haggard, prior to them there was a fellow named Tommy Collins and Wynn Stewart, who had hit records out of the Bakersfield area of California.
See, I think people have forgotten that Bakersfield had a sound.
Oh, it's huge.
You know,
it was the California country music sound.
Yeah.
Well,
you know, Bakersfield,
it's not like the Glasgow sound.
No, the Glasgow sound is a very different sound.
You know, we could sing King of the Road again, but...
No, let's not do that again. America has suffered enough.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they might retract the citizenship. They might take it back. But what Buck did in that 6-year period was amazing in terms of the body of work that he created and the sound that he really was doing. A self-contained honky-tonk band. The Beatles covered Buck in '64. Ringo sang "Act Naturally," which is Buck Owens' hit.
Oh, right, yeah.
And they're going to put me in the movies, you know. And, and Ringo did a great job with that. One of the funny introductions ever in show business was Ringo on the Ed Sullivan Show. You can get this on those DVDs that are out.
What do you mean?
You can pay for them.
What DVDs?
And then you can load them into your iPod.
Oh
if
yeah,
you'd
that's what I'm saying. You get them on the YouTube. The DVDs come through your computer, and you put them in your iPod.
There's a Sullivan series. But Ringo leans up and said, "Now here he is to sing for you, all nervous and out of tune." Ringo. He introduced himself. It was pathetic.
Really?
But it was great. Yeah, they made Ringo do his own introduction while they were moving equipment around. But he sang "Act Naturally." And Buck had that kind of impact. I mean, he was playing at the Fillmore West in 1967. And I, because of my band being a self-contained honky-tonk band when I first started out, and still, the band that's on this record is the band I was on tour with for the past 2 years, and they were doing those songs after Buck died with me. And he's most remembered now, ironically, for his non-musical persona, which was as a comedian on the series Hee Haw, which was the country version of Laugh-In.
I'm familiar with Hee Haw. Yeah. It's there's many things that I love about these United States.
And Hee Haw's
but Hee Haw ain't one of them.
Oh.
No.
I think we have your citizenship.
I was almost there, and it was snatched away from me.
Well, you snatched it right back.
No, I know. I'm sorry.
Snatched.
Well, the Hee Haw thing, is that the one
What
where
was it, from the jaws of victory you snatched defeat?
That's my speciality.
Okay, yeah.
What about the
that divorce?
Did you? Oh, dear. Yeah. Have you ever
But I
done
don't want to go into
that?
that.
Have you ever done that?
No, because I never did the first part. I kept side.
You're a wise man, sir.
Well, yeah. You find out when you don't do the first part how angry they're going to be when you get to the second part, because they hate you for not
doing the first part.
Well,
how's that going in your life?
I shouldn't have gone into that. It's going perfect.
Yeah.
Everything's fine. And that's
I don't know.
How are you doing right now? You're not in the first part.
I'm fine, thanks. How about you? What about you? Because I noticed
you're like two more evasive guys, probably. The first part for you is good right now.
Yeah,
right?
Everything's good.
Because you're not in the first part.
I'm just saying.
And it's not. So no.
This is how guys actually talk, by the way. This is like, how do you know? I'm all right.
If you don't do the first part, you don't have to deal with the ugliness of the second part.
Right. Well, you're a romantic fool.
I am.
Yeah.
No, I actually am. That's probably why I haven't.
Yeah. Would you ever get married? Would you ever get married?
I thought, boy, there are several out there. You know what? They're all happily married.
That's great.
See?
Not to you.
See?
Yeah.
No.
What could be better?
I'm trying to remain friends with...
No, come on. You're just still mad because I said I didn't like Hee Haw. I thought it was okay.
No.
I thought Hee Haw was okay.
It's one of these moments. No, but
I'd never do that again, by the way, with the hat.
Unless I do this.
Yeah.
And that's another whole...
That's a whole different thing.
Bit of tyrant history, and we don't want to go into that.
We don't want to talk about
Throw the bastards out. No, that's the foundation of this country. I'm trying to catch you back up for your citizenship test.
I know. Well, basically what happened, I think, is that the British...
Right then out.
Yeah, the British would come over, you threw them out.
Yeah, your folks have done that several...
We keep trying, they keep coming back. That's the problem. Yeah.
You forgive them.
Yeah, well, it's not that we forgive them, it's just there's 5 million Scottish people, that's it.
I know, they're not, but it's beautiful. Scotland is one of the most beautiful places on earth.
It is a very
nice place. I love it.
Except it's raining a lot. All of it.
I was there last summer, and we were in Glasgow, and it was really, really picturesque. It was just, one of those postcard days. and poured rain the day after we left, poured to the time we got out there, and the day we were there, it was great.
You know what we call that? American weather. So when the weather's like that, we go, oh, it's like America today.
You know, when they interview you at INS, when they're doing the interview for your citizenship.
Yeah. Tell them that.
Yeah.
I tell them I like hee-haw. All right, we gotta go. You're gonna come back and sing for us, though, aren't you gonna say? All right. Dwight, Yoakam, everybody. We'll be right back with Gavin the Becker. Welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. My next guest is widely regarded as the nation's leading expert on violence and terrorism. He's got a book, Fear Less, which is currently in stores. Please welcome Gavin the Becker, everybody. Gavin the Becker. Welcome, Gavin.
They stand up for everybody?
They stand up for everybody. Well, they stand up
okay.
if you're an expert on terrorism. They're not quite sure which side you're on yet, but once they know, they'll be fine. No, I have actually read your book. I read the book you wrote before this, The Gift of Fear. And I have read this, Fear Less, which is the truth about risk, safety, and security in a time of terrorism. What do you think of the way we're doing it right now? Are we doing the right thing with the, no liquid on the planes, no shampoo?
No, we're doing a lot of the wrong things.
Really? Why?
Yeah. Some, I think that, airline security is an important topic. It was before 9/11. There had been plenty of other incidents where people tried to fly airplanes into things. And the government knew that and chose to do, rather than strengthening the cockpit doors, which is the important procedure, chose to do airline screening. Which politically, we all feel it, the government's doing something, and governments throughout history like to be the way that you are spared from death. They want to tell you only we can save you from being killed.
Right, okay. So if you vote for us, we'll spare you from death.
Yeah, and they don't. They just move it around. If you put more police patrols here, you have more crime over here. It just moves around.
What about you mentioned the strengthening of the cockpit doors, right? Now, every time I'm on a plane, the door is locked, the pilots are in there, they got a little peephole and everything's, But then about halfway through the flight, nearly every flight you're on, they open the door, a pilot comes out and takes a whiz, or they have a little, they take in the
tray
bacon
of coffee and
sandwiches and stuff like that. And
that is actually the biggest problem right now in airline
is it really?
security.
That really is?
You have hit the #1 problem, because by making the cockpits entry resistant, which every taxi cab in New York City was before 9/11, and of course every, if you've gone a subway, it's entry resistant to get into the cockpit.
Yeah.
But by doing that, the government has correctly resolved the biggest problem, which is to stop people from getting into the cockpit.
Right.
But a taxi driver, alone at night at 2 in the morning in New York City, does not stop every 3 blocks and get in the back with you.
Right. Yeah.
And so
well, I know a couple of guys who actually will do that.
Oh, and you're out at 2 in the morning, so you're finding them.
You can find them. Yeah, you've got to pay a little extra, but you can.
But to open the cockpit door, one of my recommendations in this book is to stop all meal service into the cockpit. You either pre-stock the cockpit, which is easy,
sandwiches,
sandwiches are just fine, or you have a pass-through door. But to open the door during the flight,
what's
and then
a
to do it,
door?
It would be a small door that opens like you have in a prison cell. And
Hey, you want your food left?
Exactly.
Yeah, all right.
But to open the door is to defeat the entire purpose of the door, and it doesn't happen just once during a flight. It happens 6 or 7 times, and in fact, the flight attendants who visit the cockpit a lot.
Right.
You want some coffee, you want some tea, you want some sandwiches, are the ones that are most popular. So you always have them going up and knocking on the door, and the bad part is, now if someone gets into the cockpit, the cockpit door is entry resistant. So the rest of us, who really are the heroes of the incidents that happened after 9/11, there were many incidents after 9/11 with people trying to get into the cockpit.
I remember,
all stopped because the passengers now have been trained by the best training film in the history of the world, which is the events that we saw at the World Trade Center.
That's right. So, if someone, tries to hijack a plane now, everyone would say no. But if the cockpit door is locked and the guys get in there, then you've got some
That's
trouble.
the problem. That's correct. So you've identified something.
But what if the pilot needs a pee-pee, though? I mean, in some of these flights, you're doing coast to coast 5 hours. I mean, these pilots are, big tough guys, but you got to go when you got to go.
Maybe bladder training is the important
Bladder training?
Yeah, I think so. No. Truthfully, the pilot leaving the cockpit is not as serious a problem as when the flight attendant goes and opens the door. She knocks on the door.
Right.
We who are sitting in the front of the plane see that happen, and now can get up and go into the cockpit. The pilot leaving the door can do so by looking through first and see, And newer planes also can be built, as they are being done now in Israel, with the cockpit to include a bathroom, which is by far the best solution.
And what would you say is the biggest threat to the United States today, then? If not, you know, pilots going to the bathroom?
Probably turning our own precautions against us in the way that that governments do. Throughout history, terrorism has existed, so that is a given. Violence has always existed. It's the only way to deal with very powerful governments. The only option that you have if you're an adversary is terrorism. That's always existed. And always throughout history, the precautions we take are vastly more damaging than the incidents themselves. We've got an incident in 9/11 that is the only time in 230 years that Americans have had a profound transnational terrorist incident on our soil.
Right.
So for something that happens once every 230 years, we have literally turned the country upside down, so that now the population buys into all variety of precautions. Our mail is read, email can be read, habeas corpus has been let go of. Things that if bin Laden had said, do this, if he had said, I want you to do this or I'll put bombs around, I want you to give up habeas corpus, I want you to give up all kinds of freedoms and rights.
Can you explain what you mean by habeas corpus?
Which is the right not to be able to petition the government to not be held against your will.
Right.
So, for example, those 600 people and ultimately the 3,500 people who were held without attorneys in the aftermath of 9/11 didn't have their habeas corpus rights met.
Right.
If a terrorist had asked us to do that, we would have said no way.
Right.
But we, in fact, did it to ourselves. So I'm answering your question, what's the greatest danger? It is that the reactions to terrorism are invariably more potent, powerful, and devastating than the terrorism itself. Terrorism.
So what should we be doing then? What precautions should we take? What can the average American who's traveling on an airline or moving around? I mean, because you talk a lot of that in the previous book and this about what individuals will should and would actually do. What would you recommend?
Well, I do recommend many of the things that we have done. I recommend entry-resistant cockpits on airplanes.
Right.
I don't recommend taking away of all the little liquids and putting them in plastic and taking off your shoes and standing on one foot and all of the lines and all of the things that have been done to make air travel profoundly unpleasant, but profoundly nice for government, because governments love it when people will do exactly what you tell them at every second.
But what
That's all
possible,
governments, not this
possible advantage would any government get over, you know, taking people's shoes off in an airport? It's not like, oh, haha, now their shoes are off, we can snatch power.
You know what I mean? You know what's funny? I think it's exactly like aha.
Really?
Yes, I do, because aha, now they'll do anything in the world because they're afraid.
Oh, I see what you mean. So you use the fear.
Exactly.
Who was it, FDR that said that?
He said nothing to fear but fear itself. But governments throughout history, this is what I'm pointing out is not about the Bush administration, it's about every government in world history has used fear for political goals.
Wasn't that Caesar said, beware the leader who bangs the drum and speaks of war because he will take the country from you. I know because I have done this and I am Caesar.
Very true. So you know all this stuff.
I know. I don't. I'm interested in that. We have to take a break and we'll come right back. We'll be right back with Gavin Becker, everybody. Welcome back. I'm here with Gavin Becker, who, amongst other things, is an expert on the behaviour or the anticipating the behaviour of people who may be violent, both in a terrorist or a domestic situation. That's kind of your stock and trade, right? I remember reading in your first book, you talk about it's a good idea not to watch the local news that much, given the fact, because you always see stuff that'll scare you. Do you think that the media, and I mean, I'm kind of leading you with this question, I guess, but the media hypes up the fear for their own benefit?
Sure, that's the business they're in. The
Right.
business they're in. 45 hours every day in every major city of new, original production designed primarily to cause fear. And a lot of it aimed at women, which is to make women believe that you can't possibly protect yourself and that only men can do it for you. And so you have all these scare stories. You know, they really ought to begin the news, I'll say the Channel 2 news, with, you know, welcome to the Channel 2 news, we're surprised you made it through another day.
Right.
And here's what happened to everybody who didn't. And then there's the death litany, all the ways we die.
And how do they actually, I mean, because obviously these things are happening, they're not making up incidents, but how do they report them? Is there a style of reporting?
There is both. There's a style, and there's also the fact that today in the satellite age, we get the news from anywhere on Earth that an airplane happens to fall to Earth, we get the footage.
Right.
So you're getting on a plane, you think, oh, I saw that terrible airline disaster, and so it's with satellite. I remember being in a hotel, and I saw a terrible fire downtown on the news, and it was muted, which is my favorite way to watch the news. It looks
Right.
great. Very serious. You don't.
A
you
lot
don't
of
have
people
to
watch me that way, you know.
I didn't realize you had sound until I got here tonight.
Good
Anyway, they have this. They had a fire, and you see the ambulances, and you see all that stuff, and I think, oh, I better learn what this is. And you turn it on, and it's in Caracas, Venezuela.
Right.
That fire can't possibly interrupt my plans for the day. It
Right.
can't hurt me in any way. So we get police chases that are from Australia and New Zealand. We get it all every day. There is enough in the world to do it. And then there's the strategies. After 9/11, for example, they used, I saw a story about a cyclone, and it said, next up, direct hit on a small town. Well, they know what we're thinking about, direct hit on a small
Right,
town.
of course.
Or terror in the sky. That was a story about a very turbulent flight.
Right.
When we hear terror in the sky, we think, oh, geez, it's another terrorist incident.
Right.
So all of the language that's used, all of the warning signs. Next up, an expert tells you the warning signs you need to know about such and such. In my office, we've got this joke that it'll be, next up, burglars who hide out in your purse and rob you when you get home. And then there'd be the warning signs. Purse extra heavy. Voices coming from purse. They're all like that.
I've had voices come from my purse. But why? What profits? I mean, because no one really does that. I can't believe that people just do that just to scare you. What's in it for a news organization to scare you? What's in it for them? How does it turn into money?
I'll tell you exactly how it turns
why
into
they'll
money.
do it.
100 years ago, the town crier would go down the street and say, 11 o'clock and all's well. And the town crier of today, the local news, goes down the street and says, 11 o'clock and mother's milk causes cancer in children.
Right.
Anything to get our attention. What happens, to answer your question, is nothing gets our attention like fear.
Right.
You can't hear, next up, an expert tells about the dangers of dust to your children. Vacuum cleaners can kill your children, and not... You think, oh, shit, I got to watch that now.
Right, of course, you have to.
And
Yeah.
next up, turkey that killed 4 on Thanksgiving. I got to watch about the turkeys.
Yeah.
And so it's the only one you never hear is, next up, a new study that says television news causes stress, suicide, drug addiction, and hypertension.
Yeah, right.
All
Yeah,
true,
I'm gonna
by the
tell
way.
you that.
Yeah. Good to hear that applause.
Take that hand that feeds me.
We go right into the news now, right, of course.
How then, slightly moving off that a little bit for my own personal safety.
Sure.
How should we mark this day, in your opinion? How would you mark, how would you remember the terrible events of 2001?
Well, I think that, to me, an important thing to take away from this is that in these last 6 years, we have not had another transnational terrorist incident in America. The only one we had that was close, the man who could have set fire to explosives in his shoe, was stopped not by government but by civilians on the plane who observed what he was doing. So I think we can look at this day with some gratitude that we have a record, one profound transnational terrorist incident in our history, one, that any other nation on earth would trade that record. It's true, this is the worst terrorist incident in world history. It is. And it's my belief that it will remain so for hundreds of years. That is my belief.
Wow. So you think we should remember that? And I kind of want to take you up, even although we're kind of out of time, but I want to just talk to you about, given the fact that we haven't had those incidents, and we have been following all these procedures, like taking our shoes off, has that helped?
I think in the case of airline security, it has helped.
Right.
Obviously, what happens with terrorism is that when one kind of target is fortified, there's another kind.
Go for another target.
You put the bulletproof windows on the building, and then somebody shoots at the people arriving at work, which happened at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. So there will always be the terrorist's imagination starts where the security expert or the government's budget ends. But I think that if we say that these procedures in recent years are responsible for no terrorism since 2001, then we have a big question to ask is, what is responsible for the no terrorism for the 200 years prior to that?
Yeah, well, there you have it.
So it isn't all government. It really is individual citizens. In England, you probably lived there at some time in your life.
At one point. Yeah.
So many bombs with the IRA. So many bombs.
Yeah.
And so
London, I lived there at that time.
Yeah, so did I. And the general public would see a package or would see a suitcase somewhere, and they would be the reason that the thing didn't happen. They would be who calls the police. It's not the FBI.
Yeah.
It's the phone call to the FBI. And that's what all of us can do when we observe something that seems wrong in our culture, even though it will be very, very rare in America that we have transnational terrorism.
All right, well, stay vigilant, stay alert. It's very nice to talk to you, Gavin. Thank you very much for coming in. Gavin the Becker, everybody. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Well, Here he is again, performing Only You. Please welcome my lovely friend, Dwight Yoakam, everybody. Dwight Yoakam.
Only you can make my dreams come true. Only you can turn my skies to blue. Love like ours should not be far apart. Only you can break my heart. Only you can end these sleepless nights. Only you can make things turn out right. You and you alone can keep us far apart. Only you can break my heart. Make my dreams come true. Only you can turn my skies to blue. Love like ours should not be far apart. Only you can break my heart. Only you can break my heart. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Skip.
That was awesome, buddy. It's outstanding.
Good to see you.
Buddy.
Good to see you. Thank you for doing this show.
Dwight Yoakam, everybody. Good night.